You're listening to Adrian Barailee Podcast.
You're listening to Adrian Barailee Podcast.
You're listening to Adrian Barailee Podcast.
Dr. Warren, welcome to the podcast. Before we start off, can you tell us something that you would like people to know about you, that someone who don't know you?
Well, I don't know if I'm in the right spot here. My job is faculty at Western Seminary in Portland, Oregon, in the counseling department. So I teach counseling students. That's my vocation. And that involves some teaching. It involves supervision of students when they're doing some internship. Right across our campus here, our small little campus, is a counseling office that I work out of as well. I do some supervision of students there. I do see some clients from the community, counseling clients. And that's my work life. Other than that, I'm married. I've got 2 adult daughters. One daughter is married, and the other one is still with us, just graduated from college, lives at home with us. And I live just north of here in Washington State. And you're getting the sounds of my computer working. I'll mute it there. That's a real basic nutshell, but I'm a graduate of Western's counseling program, graduated in 2007. And since then, I've worked in the counseling field. I've also done a lot of church stuff. That's still true. Do a lot of stuff with my church up there. Right now, I'm currently one of the elders at my church. We have kind of a rotating group of men that serve in that role, and I'm doing that right now. Yeah, and do a lot of teaching at my church as well, and a lot of teaching at school. So, so I teach a lot and do a lot of one-on-one with students and a lot of one-on-one with clients in the counseling office as well. So that's kind of that's a broad sketch of what I do.
Yeah, but also, like, how did your, decided you wanted to take a route of the counseling and become a counselor and become a professor and teach at school? We always wanted to become a counselor.
That's a great question. No, not really. I kind of I took a long journey coming to that place, but I do feel where I'm at right now. My own take on it is it's I do feel that's where God has me, and it's thriving, and I enjoy it a lot, and I don't see myself moving past this kind of arrived where I'm going to be. But it was kind of a long road getting there. I initially I did a seminary degree thinking that I was going to do vocational ministry. I did an MDiv, like yourself. You're doing an MDiv right now at another seminary, and my thought was, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I during the course of seminary, grad school, I was working and doing classes, which is a lot, and I was married and had 2 children during that time, and I was also I had a part-time in quotations ministry role that was pretty demanding. And so during my seminary degree, I got totally burnt out, really depleted, really fatigued, exhausted, frankly. And I had in my back of my mind the counseling was very interesting, and I found myself in one-on-one conversations with people and finding that enriching, and very interested in people and curious about their stories. And so counseling was in the back of my mind, like that would be something interesting. And when I got kind of burnt out in school and seminary, my solution to that was to sort of I ended up leaving my ministry role. I stayed at that church. I'm still at that church and do things more in a lay role as opposed to a job or vocational role. But then I went to over to Western and started a counseling degree during that time, and did that for it was a 3-year program. I did that, and I've worked in the counseling field kind of after that, really kind of part-time. And then about I was doing that. I was also teaching at a school up in Washington, and at a high school, junior high and high school, teaching Bible classes at Christian high school. Yeah. So, and I was doing that and doing some counseling, and then had opportunity to do some adjunct teaching because I had counseling degree. I was working in that field and that role, and it was a school that here in Portland that had opportunity to do some adjunct teaching, which is they hire you part-time to teach a class here and there occasionally.
Yeah.
And I did that for several years and really loved every minute of it. There was something about teaching adult students that I really enjoyed, teaching counseling that I really enjoyed. And I was going to stay at that school and just do that for a long time, and ended up, I loved it. And I said, hey, hire me. And I did not have a doctorate. So they're like, well, that kind of leaves you in an adjunct role. And so long story short, that is what, loving that so much is what prompted me to go back to school, do a doctorate in counselor education, and thinking that I would stay at that school, but ended up there was the opportunity here at Western where I had graduated from, and I'm looking back, I'm so glad that was the path that God had carved out, and that I didn't stay at that other school, that I was able to come here because it's been such a great experience. And Western, the counseling program has been really good about, well, that's a much larger topic.
Go
But
ahead.
what we would call integration of teaching our students to be skilled counselors, but also wanting to form in them a biblical worldview that's solid. And putting those two together is what the program at Western is all about. And having graduated from here as a student and also as now faculty this is my 6th year here, I am glad to see that Western's still doing that well. And of course I'm biased, but I'm excited about that aspect. And we still work at it very diligently to try to do that well. But I think that we are, compared to other places, not the only school in the world trying to do that, but that's a larger topic. But anyway, I'm here, been here for 6 years, but it has been, I am 53, so that's been a long journey. I didn't figure that out at 23 or even 33.
Yeah.
I completed my doctorate in it was 2021. That's not that long ago. So it's only 4 years ago that I kind of in a way, I wouldn't say started my career, but sort of landed where I'm going to be, And that wasn't the first thing or the second thing or the third thing. It was kind of a roundabout thing. But part of to get back to your question, how did I get there? Part of it was just really enjoying teaching. And I was working at a school up in Washington teaching junior high school students Bible, because I had that ministry degree, but I wasn't working as a pastor or at a church, but I was working teaching. And I enjoyed that, and then I did some adjunct counseling teaching and really just loved that. And I'll do teaching at my church, and was some kind of class or whatever, and just feel that passion to do that and to see the outcome of that go well and get feedback from lots of different people that goes well when I do it.
Yeah.
So the fact that I would end up as a professional teacher is just kind of my wiring and gifting and passion, and the fact that it's counseling is reflective of the other part of my profession that I'm in is a counselor. So to marry those two together, my own gifting and my profession, to be a counseling professor is just suits me to a T. And it took a long time for me to figure that out.
Yeah.
But to arrive there, it's like I feel content. I feel like God's blesses it. Eric Little, the guy who was the famous runner, he would say, he famously quoted of saying to I think it was his sister, he said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And he wasn't saying that arrogantly. He wasn't saying that like I'm the best ever, but he's saying, this is what I was made to do, meant to do, wired to do. And I feel like that in teaching.
Wow, that's great.
And when I teach, I feel God's pleasure. It's like, okay, God, this is what you have created and gifted me to do. Doesn't mean I can't polish it and learn to do it better, or that I do it better than other people. No, but just that sort of deep contentment and just awareness that God's saying, yeah, do it and do it well, and blessings, So I feel really,
that's amazing.
One of my colleagues who's at the San Jose campus,
Mm-hmm.
she will say, her name is Judy. I quote her often. She'll say, my vocation is my vacation. That's how I feel.
That's wonderful.
I have a lot of fun. It is, it's not that I don't, work and put in effort on things, but the things I do, I just have a lot of fun at. It's so fun teaching, counseling students. It's so fun to sit down with supervisees who are interning as counselors, and it's also very fun to sit down with clients in the counseling room. So it's fun to be on your podcast too.
Well,
That's another
thank
thing
you.
I can say, yeah.
That's wonderful. Also, can you help us a little bit understand for, because I come from country Nepal, and then for us, the idea of counseling is very foreign.
Okay.
And can you help us, for those of us who are very unaware and uneducated about what counseling is, and can you a little bit define what is counseling and what makes Christian counseling different from a secular counseling?
That's a great question. And I can only answer it from my cultural perspective and point of view. I'm not well-versed in Nepalese culture or point of view, so I have to rely on you for that. But that's a great question. What is this thing called counseling? It is kind of a Western thing, I suppose. And in some ways, someone from not in the Western sphere or world would say, well, why in the world would you call someone, schedule an appointment, and pay them to have a conversation? That's weird. Admittedly, yes, that's strange. It is weird. Part of that is our culture in the United States is, and this is not completely true, but it's. I'm gonna guess that it's more true than it is in Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
That individuals are more disconnected, more isolated.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't that sense of rich community or roots. Oftentimes, not completely, but in a broad sense, I think that's true. We have, that's there is a sense of what an American is, but is there a sense of what a Oregonian is or a Washingtonian? There are those things, but it's become more nebulous and more loose, and it's not all that different from somebody over in, say, Missouri in a lot of ways, although there are some. But there is that sort of, what would I say? many people in America are lonely and isolated and disconnected from other people. So that's, again, not completely true, but a lot of times true. And so if that person has difficulty,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have a built-in network of people in their community to rely on,
Yeah.
to sit around the fire at night and talk about their issues and problems. They're
Mhm.
sitting in their apartment alone oftentimes.
Yeah.
So in that kind of environment where someone who is, we're in another culture, okay, let's say Mexico, generally speaking, they're much more connected to family, extended family, the community, and they're much more verbal and emotive and less isolated. Now, I'm not saying they don't have their own sort of challenges. Every culture does, but the difference there is pretty drastic. So, in America or other Western countries, you have kind of two things that make counseling something that's attractive to people. One is that they have money to spend on that.
Mhm.
Other places it would be, why would I ever spend money on that? I've got to spend money on surviving and housing
Yeah.
and food, and
Yeah.
so the affluence that people have, and then secondly, it's that isolation. So if you have money yet isolation,
Mm.
counseling thrives, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's an oversimplification, and it's not probably fair to a lot of nuances. But so back to your question, counseling is a Western thing, and particularly the United States, that it does thrive and grow because people are needing support. They don't have it built in, like in many other
Yeah.
countries they might, right? So
Mm.
they come and they seek out someone who can be helpful to them and support them. So what is counseling? Well, it is a conversation, and even someone who would look at why in the world would you ever pay money for that? Okay,
Mm.
yeah, it's a good question. But even if you're coming from not a Western perspective, you could see probably the value
Yeah.
of sitting down with another person and talking about your life, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do that anywhere else, if I do it here, how helpful that could be.
Mm.
Just that conversation. Now, counseling is a bit more than that, but listening to a client that comes into my office and just listening to their story, listening to what they're wrestling with, helping them to talk through things, just that is
Mhm.
extremely valuable to people. Again, because oftentimes they don't have that in other places, or they have some of that, but
Mm.
this is more a concentrated version of that. So back to your question. So counseling is a conversation. That's really what it is. It's most often one client, one counselor talking together one-on-one in a confidential way.
Yeah.
And it's a space for that person to talk about what problems they're facing in life, what relationships they're trying to navigate, and helping them explore how to do that better. Now, to add to that, sometimes the person that comes, they have some mental health challenges. That's not
Mhm.
always true. I have folks that will come and do counseling that don't have a mental health diagnosis.
Mm.
What does that mean? Well, we have I have one over there on the shelf over there. Big book of diagnosis. What does that mean?
Mhm.
Diagnosis is, like in a medical doctor office, they look at you physically and say, oh, well, the diagnosis says you have a broken elbow.
Yeah.
Well, that's the diagnosis. Well, there's a mental health version of that. We have a big book of diagnoses. It's called the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Doesn't matter. But not every person that comes into counseling has a mental health diagnosis in there, but some of them often do. So if
Yeah.
it's an example that often it comes up is depression, or anxiety, or there's lots of them. So a counselor also has some training about awareness of those things and what might be helpful to someone who is dealing with that particular diagnosis. So it's so the folks that have that happening, it's additional to just the conversation. It's like, okay, what is helpful when you are facing, let's say, depression or any of these other things. So that kind of expands that counselor role. It's not just let me listen and hear you, although that's a big part of it. It's also if there's a particular diagnosis that's there, what kind of helps have been found that are useful. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
If you're
It does.
hearing that from
I
the
mean,
Nepalese
I
lens,
think,
what would be
I feel like so it's a way, because like what I'm so far, I think what I understand is more of like you're communicating in a way, because you're isolating yourself. You don't have to isolate yourself. You can actually go and talk to somebody else who could understand what you are going through, and also not only about well, I'm going and talking to somebody else. I could have like some of the things that I've been dealing with, stress, depressions, which are the major cause of the different kinds of diseases that we know now. So I think recognizing all of that, it plays a role. But also, I think what I'm trying to understand is, so how, when you talk about the Christian, Christianity, we know like the role Holy Spirit plays in our life. And so as a counselor, as a Christian counselor, like Holy Spirit is working as well. And then you are there as well so what is the role of counselor? You are more of like enabling the role of the Holy Spirit in the person's life, or you are more like helping that person to recognize the role of the Holy Spirit? Does it make sense? Like,
That's a good question. So what we've described so far, you might easily imagine a pastor or an elder in a church or something sitting down with someone and doing something that looks very similar to what we're talking about. Oh, let's talk about what's going on for you. Let me listen to what you're dealing with and have some compassion. And so there is a lot of overlap there. There is also some difference. And where in a professional counselor role, we would see folks. So I mentioned the counseling center here at the school. It is, we will see folks that come in that many of them are Christians, but there also are some that are not. So that's going to look different than a pastoral conversation, which is most often someone within the church. This is often with people who do not have faith in Christ. And so it's a little bit different, and it depends on that person, what they invite us to talk into, and what our scope of expertise is a part of it. But as far as the Holy Spirit's role, it is being it's part of it is a perspective of seeing that person in a biblical worldview way. Like their ultimate need is for Christ, but they may not be talking to me about that right now. They want to talk about how to manage their anger. Well, okay, we can do that. And if there's openness, if they have a willingness, we can raise the topic of, where is God in this for you? But that person might say, well, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not going to say, no, you must. I'm going to force you to talk about it. It's being sensitive to, the Holy Spirit's involved with that. When do I invite this person to consider an alternative point of view? When do I treat them with grace and listen to what their thoughts are? treating them with dignity as a human being, treating them with respect and patience, and what is the right timing of that. So the Holy Spirit is definitely in the room, and the Christian counselor is going to be relying on the God to say, hey, give me wisdom, help me to understand the right moment to converse about the right topic with this person. It would be easy to do that too quickly and to force someone to talk about something they don't want to, which would be detrimental. And it would be easy to never, ever bring up that topic, right? So now, with the client that comes in that is a Christian and they do want to talk about spiritual topics, we can do a lot more conversing about, what do you think God's trying to show you? What's your view of God? Are you able to experience His love and His grace and His power in your life? Or, so if you think about a pastoral role, pastoral counseling would be quite a bit more direct on those things, quite a bit more. Hey, let's look at what the scriptures have to say about that.
Yeah.
Dear believer, in a professional counseling role, it's going to be much more nuanced and dependent upon what the client is wanting to do and where they're at. Now, we always keep that perspective of ultimately, I know this person needs Christ, and I know that we all need forgiveness of sin and salvation, but that may not be where they're at in terms of conversing about it and being sensitive, much like you would with say a friend that you know who's not a Christian. Is now the time that I, very directly, assertively proclaim what they need to hear, or is it more building relationship? And so it's similar, but I don't know if that answers your question or not.
But what I'm trying to understand is it more of a technique or a skill that you develop over time, or is this like the certain things, like a technique, or this is the right time to ask these questions so that person can think more clearly?
Yeah. So to answer your question is yes and no. That we do teach counseling skills, and one of the first classes that students take is, we call it clinical foundations, or you might say counseling foundations, and it's those listening skills. It's empathy. It's being really attentive to what someone is saying. And part of those skills, there are times when you set things in front of a client to consider or think about. Is also an important counseling skill, but the timing of when you do that and the right moment is not so formulaic as it is relational. Where is this person at? How well do we know each other? And if I have a close friend, let's say, I can go to that friend and say, hey, what are you doing, man? If I see something they're doing and I don't like it, I can be very direct. If it's somebody that I know less well, I don't have that avenue to be quite so direct. So it's about building relationship with the client. It's about working with them where they want to go, much more than it is about me being very direct in speaking to them. Although there might be times of that. It really depends on the relationship that you have. I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but there are skills that we talk about. Listening skills, and also at times ways to help clients consider goals, consider taking action, consider changes and growth. Absolutely. But that's in the context of listening really well and having a really good relational connection, that those opportunities come up.
So when you talk about listening very well, what does that mean? Is it a certain like a body expression that we had to do? Can you also give us for those of us who don't know like what listening very well means?
That's a great question. Well, we have a whole course on it. So how would I boil that down? It's Well, one thing that we do is we stress the word empathy a lot. Empathy, and I don't know how the word empathy would connect with your Nepalese listeners, or if that's
Yeah, I guess it's
sort of like a strange word.
No, I think it's a very, very easy, like I feel you, what you're going through, I
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
like, I think Jesus was saying is like cry with those who cry and
Absolutely.
rejoice with those who rejoice.
Yes,
And
Romans.
I think is in every culture. I think like that's just,
Yeah.
I think more like, I think, Professor Todd Miles would call it a general revelation. I think that's more like
very good.
like a general revelation for everyone. It's like,
Yeah.
when you're sad, I think it's an instinct. Like you just be sad, and then if that person rejoices when you're sad, you know that that's not your friend, that's an enemy, and then
Absolutely.
you want to be like far away from that person as much as you can. Yeah, I think
you get what I'm saying. So
yes,
in that skills class, the core thing, if I was boiling it down, maybe unfairly, but boiling it down to like a short answer, it would be empathy.
yeah,
And can I feel with that person what they're sharing? Like that does so much for that person. And the sort of exaggerated version of that would be, let's say, you know someone who has just lost their spouse. Their spouse has just died. Would you show up at the funeral with lots of advice and tell them, hey, what you really need is a casserole, and here you go, and what and you also need some exercise, so let's get out there and do that, and hey, you need to suck it up and work hard. That would be pretty insensitive, right? Even if some of those things might be helpful or true. No, you wouldn't do that. You would go to the funeral and you would say, oh, friend, you have to be so grieved right now, and really softly just sit with them and shed some tears with them. Well, that's the exaggerated version, but it's like that in the counseling room. Counselors need to empathize with their clients and put themselves in their shoes. What's it like to be in their world? What are they feeling and experiencing? Can I understand that? Help me understand what it's like to be you. That's empathy and listening and being very curious about that. Rather than what some people think counseling is, let me tell you what to do. Let me give you advice. Let me just, I've heard your problem. I'll tell you what to do. That's what counseling is. No, that's not what it is. It's instead being very understanding and empathy. And then when there is that built understanding, it helps the person then consider what they might do, rather than I'm wise, you're dumb, I'll tell you what to do. That's not what it is. And I don't know if that makes sense. It's hard to think about that for folks who are not counselors, but some of our counseling students, they learn as they go. They go in and meet with clients and come off with a bunch of advice. And, I know what you should do this. The client rarely experiences that as helpful.
Yeah. Also, can I ask this question? Because, like you say, like having empathy, like being in someone else's shoes, like someone who is going through all of this hard, and it's just, so for example, if you're a counselor and you are seeing like, let's just say 5 people in a day, and 5 people coming with like a 5 different issue, like how does that plays a role? Because like some people might go into like a really, really big tragedy in their life and you are like really sad. Okay, you have like a 5 minutes and to see another client now. Okay, take a 5-minute cool down, and the other person is really very happy. So is it, as a counselor, you're going through so many different emotions in every session? So in that case, like as a like someone who has experience, like what do you do to unwind yourself?
That's a really insightful question. Yeah. I'm surprised that you're asking it.
Yeah,
It would
no,
make me
it's just
wonder,
awkward to me.
have you ever done any been a counselor yourself?
I have. I mean, like I started a church in 2018 in Kathmandu. So like most of my counseling is more like just suck it up and then do it and trust in the Holy Spirit and then God. And then if you're not doing it, your faith is not strong enough. I'm learning that that's not the case. I'll come back to that as well. But yes, can you help us see that as well?
Yeah. It's a great question, because from the counselor point of view, that's exactly what happens. You get it gets heavy. If you're really empathizing with that person, it can weigh on you. You hear stories of people dealing with very tragic, painful things. And if you're feeling with them, that weighs on you. But our time is up, and then in 5 minutes I got to see someone else. How do you shift gears? That's a great question. It is a challenge, and counselors, students who are, doing their internship will experience that and ask the question that you just asked. So, how do I deal with this? It's so heavy, and then I've got to be the next client's really happy. Well, I don't know that I have a magic answer, but just recognizing that is a challenge. And part of it is developing no one does it perfectly, is what I would say. And sometimes we do take home with us the heaviness that we felt and heard. But it's being aware of how it's affecting you. And like, whoa, that last session was very heavy. And I appreciate them sharing, and that was so real, but boy, it's leaving this weight on me. One of it is just being aware, like, boy, that's affecting me, instead of like just pushing it away and rushing into the next one. It's like, as a Christian counselor, it's like, okay, Lord, would you keep working in that person's life? Would you give me strength to bear this emotional load? And Lord, would you help me focus on this next person? And Lord, I just put it in your hands for a while. And taking that pause to catch your breath. Okay, I only have 2 minutes, but I'm gonna take a deep breath. I'm gonna ask the Lord to give me peace. Help me think about that next person. You can do that a little bit better with practice as you see more folks. You get better at that. No one does it perfectly. If we're listening well, it does stick with us in a way, and but you do get better as a counselor, sort of having some separation, which sounds weird to a non-counselor, but that's why your question is so insightful. You do have to have some separation. Like, even if this is a super sad story, I want to, leave that space and go into another space. So it's having a good boundary there, which there's a balance, right? I could be very robotic and cold and uncaring, which would be the opposite of what we're talking about, listening empathically and caring and compassionate. I want to be those things, but I've got to also be able to step out of that space when the time is done. So one of my professors said this once, and I quote it often. He said, when I'm with someone, I want to be 100% present. I want to be totally there. You got all of me. I'm here. You got all of me right now. I don't want to be there and be thinking about what I'm doing next and distracted and not really listening or tuned with you. I want to be totally there. But when that session ends, I want to, you have none of me. I'm going to walk out of that space. And I don't say that way to clients, but with practice, students, counselors learn to sort of have that separation. And yes, that's sad, but I'm out of that space now, and I'm present with someone else. And you can't do 7 or 8 of those in a day. You can do maybe 5 or 6. But it is a challenge for counselors to have that separation, to move from very heavy to some different, happier, lighter thing to than a third thing. It does take some energy out of you. It takes some. At the end of that day, you'll be quite tired, even though you haven't dug a ditch or moved a bunch of rocks.
True.
Emotionally, it's taxing. So, outside of work, counselors have to be real intentional about doing. We use a buzzword. It's called self-care. Things that I do that recharge my batteries, that refresh me, and that's going to be different for different people, whatever it is. But I can't just work all the time, because if I do that, I will slowly get depleted and burnt out. We talk about counselors having compassion fatigue sometimes. So counselors have to be really attentive about, okay, how am I feeding my own spiritual life, my own emotional life, my own relationships outside of work? Very, very important, because they affect how I do my work.
Yeah. Also, can I ask, in terms of, because you just say, because there's a lot of weight into it. There is so much of so many different things going on in terms of. Because at first, I was like, it's just not sitting and listening, but there is like so many things is happening right over there. A lot of healing processes happening there. But also, in terms of like someone who is going to seek for counseling, so how do you see the success or progress? It's like, how do I know, like the counseling that I'm getting, the counselor I'm going to, is being fruitful to me?
Yeah.
Because also, because you can see like you're already fed up, like you're already tired as a counselor. But for me, because as someone who needs a counseling, I wanted to go and seek a help. For some people like us, who are the client, is like, how do we see, okay, so, well, it's not working for me. I need to go different route.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we recognize that as a client or as a person?
That's a great question. How do we measure success, or how does the client measure success
Yeah.
or progress in counseling? That's a great question. Well, ultimately, it is the client who gets to decide whether this is working or not, and it is grounded in that empathy and that relationship. Clients are not going to stay if they don't feel heard, if they don't feel a good connection with the counselor. That's pretty foundational, right? So it's important that the client feels that connection, feels safe, feels like they are being heard, that there is a good connection. But that's just the beginning, right? So clients also will define it different ways. But one of the questions we'll ask them, what would you like to get out of this? If you came here for 6 weeks and you once a week typically, and we had a good connection and you had a place here to feel understood and heard and talk about things, that's really good. But what would you like to take away from it? What would you like to see different? And in a counseling role, we're not going to necessarily define that for the client, but we're going to help them talk about it, right? What kind of goals would you like to set? And it ultimately, we want to help clients see behavioral change in whatever it is. So if I am, let's say I have super high anxiety and I have so much anxiety that I can barely go outside of my house. I often don't go to work and I just sit at home because I'm just so scared. Well, they need a place where they feel someone understands and is compassionate and empathy. And that's very, very important. But then, client, where would you like to see that behavior different? Would it be one day, one time a week you go outside? Let's start there. But whatever they want it to be, part of the counselor's role is bringing that up. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I do want to help you say something is your goal, right? And defining it behaviorally. So in that example, it could be something that's like, well, I'm gonna talk to my neighbor 2 times this week, or whatever. You can think of 1,000 different examples, but it's helping them. And part of that is by just asking the question, what would you like to do? Behave. What would you like to change about how you're living, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, I know what you need to do. 5 times this week you're going to do 100 push-ups. Whatever. No client really wants me to tell them what it is, but it is part of my job to help them vocalize what they want it to be.
Yeah.
But so how do I know if it's progressing? Well, that connection, that empathy, that relationship is key, because the client's not going to stick around if that's not there. But then it is also, how do we translate this into behavior change, whatever that might be? It's up to the client to answer, but it's up to the counselor to help them ask that question. And let's not avoid that.
Yeah.
It's great if you want to come here and vent and have compassion and what we just talked about. I'm totally into that, and love that. But it's also in the right moment, in the right time, helping them consider, okay, what would be helpful in this situation to do differently?
Because what in a case, in terms of, let's just say, I go in for a session and I just feel like it's not working on me. It's just a waste of time. I'm gonna just walk out. If you're a counselor, like, how do you reconcile with the fact is that you cannot help everyone, but also you have a compassion and you have empathy for that person. You want to help. That's why you went through all those degrees. You took all the training, sit on this, all the lectures. Like, what would you say to those people, like, who would take very personally?
Well, sometimes that does happen. You have clients that are just and it's their judgment that matters. They're the customer there. So sometimes clients will decide, no, this isn't working for me. I don't feel the connection for whatever reason. Counselors grow in being welcoming, and they work at being understanding and compassionate. So as you practice in internship and grow, you get better at welcoming people. You get better at empathy. You get better at listening. Most of the time, that's attractive to people. And if they get a connection with you, they really like it and they come back. But not always. Sometimes there's just disconnects personality-wise. Client doesn't like the color of shirt you wear. Who knows, right? Or they just don't feel like it's a good fit for them. That does happen. So the wise counselor recognizes that happens. You kind of think about, okay, is there something I could do to be more welcoming? That's a good question. But oftentimes it's not. It's just a preference maybe. And that's okay. And it's not like they come into a counseling room where the door is locked. It's unlocked.
Yeah.
And we want you to choose to be here. And if it's not something you want, then are there other counselors around that I could get you connected with that might be a better fit for you? Hey, no problem. Don't take it personally. And the door is open if you'd like to come back. But if there's and depending on the situation, you learn a little bit about what they're looking for. You might know another counselor that might fit them better. Or they may not be in a place where they want to work on whatever it is. And that happens too. So there could be lots of reasons why that happens, but it's not unheard of. It does happen. So you kind of have to be like, well, okay, no problem. Now, if all of your clients have that reaction to you,
then
you're doing something wrong. You're being, I guess I need to revisit. Am I rude somehow that I'm not realizing? All your clients run screaming from the room. That's a problem. But one person who doesn't quite feel the connection, that happens to every counselor at some point in their life. And for our interns, sometimes that's hard when it happens the first time.
Mm-hmm.
and they're thinking, oh no, I'm not cut out for this. No, it just happens. And we think about, well,
Yeah.
what did you say? What did you do? Let's try to be
Mm.
welcoming, but the most welcoming person and most connecting person as a counselor will have clients that also will say, you're not for me. Oh, okay. And it's, I think of, this is a totally different thing, but
Yeah.
I think of Jesus, who was, the best teacher in the world
Mm-hmm.
ever, who had people who said, nah, he's not for me, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you can do everything right and it still is just a miss, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But I think that if you're a growing counselor and you're working at being welcoming and you're truly interested in what people have to say, most of the time that's going to be attractive to people. So
Yeah. Also, just to switch our conversation to a little bit to different track right now. In terms of like some of because I minister at church as well, and then a lot of the time like feel like anxiety, depressions, and all of those are major issue. It is often when people try to come to bring it to you, I feel like it's more of like the spiritual practice they're doing. I think is not good enough, and I feel like I'm now because I'm now getting training from different experts, and then now I'm being now able to understand. But I think some of us we still have this very hard time to see faith and stress and all of those things. Like what's the role of faith? Because you as being a minister as well, does it the faith has to do with the depression and anxiety, or it is just a natural cause everyone goes through it? Like how do we reconcile with those factors as a minister?
well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That would be a whole book we could write right there.
Yeah.
Well, certainly those things have spiritual aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Bible talk about anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
It does. But extreme response would be on either side. One would be, anxiety is totally a spiritual thing, and your faith is weak if you're anxious, and anxiety is a sin, and stop that.
Yeah.
And the other end would be anxiety is totally not a spiritual thing. It's totally a medical thing, and it doesn't involve your faith at all. Well, that's not true either, right? It's in the middle. Anxiety, we'll just take that as an example. We could talk about depression. What the scriptures do talk about anxiety, and part of it is, am I resting and trusting God, and that He is in control, that He loves me, that He has a good plan for me, that He wants the best for me?
Yeah.
Or am I really, really nervous? And so there are questions of faith that come up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet I do know some people that struggle with anxiety that have a really strong spiritual life and faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a mistake to just say to someone, oh, you're struggling with anxiety, you just need to, trust God more and build your faith, and what's wrong with you? That's overly simplified. But I do hear sometimes in Christian circles, people being condemned for having anxiety, and because it says, do not be anxious.
Yeah.
And if you're anxious, it's a sin. And so now I'll say a little bit about that, but I look at it as anxiety is an emotion that people feel, and it's not a evil thing to feel, and you can't always control when you feel it, right? I think Jesus, when He was in the garden, was very anxious because He saw what was coming.
Yeah.
And He prayed and He wrestled with that. Are we going to say that Jesus wasn't feeling that? I would argue highly against that. But yet I do hear folks sometimes say, actually, just a few weeks ago, I was in a church meeting. We were talking about something, and somebody was sharing their experience about someone having anxiety, and the guy says, and anxiety is a sin. So we talked about that, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So I talked to him afterwards, and I said, from a counseling perspective, and I believe the scriptures wholeheartedly, I don't think that's right to say anxiety is a sin, because I'm thinking of it as, the gentleman I confronted about that, he was humble, and we conversed about it, and came to understanding. But that passage where it says, "Do not be anxious," it's Philippians 4, and if you read the context of it, okay, it's often quoted, the starting right there, "Do not be anxious," but the phrase right before it is that the Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious, but instead bring your request to the Lord and pray, and the peace that passes all understanding, right? So it's not so much a don't you dare be anxious, and if you are, zap, that's wrong. It's more of God is saying, it says the Lord is near. The Lord is at hand, is what it says. So it's saying, God's saying, I'm here. I'm with you. Don't be anxious. Don't be afraid. One of the most often repeated commands in Scripture is don't be afraid. And it's actually oftentimes tied to the Lord's presence. Don't be afraid, I'm here, right? So instead of looking at it as, well, this is a command, and if you're missing it, you're disobeying. No, it's not. It's more of I take that more of as a word of comfort. I'm here. Don't be anxious. Tell me what's on your mind. It says, let your requests be made known to God, right? So God is much more gracious and tender towards people who have anxiety. He's not up there saying, oh, you feel anxiety? That's sin. Wrong. No. He's saying, it's okay. I'm with you. Tell me what's on your mind, right? That's much more the heart of God. And yes, it says do not be anxious, but it's saying it in a way of kind of like a do not fear. I'm here. It's going to be okay. Tell me what's bothering you, right? That's God, not, oh, you feel anxiety, you're wrong. But I've met many Christians who feel guilty about their anxiety feelings. Now, what you do with that feeling, right, is, of course, in your control. But whether you feel that or not is something that, can I reflect on the Lord is with me? Psalm 23, I will not fear no evil. Why? Even though I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because your rod and your staff, you comfort me. You're with me, your presence, right? They go hand in hand. So it's not a strict sort of robotic command or rule. Don't you ever feel anxious. It's more of a comforting. I'm with you. Don't be anxious. It's okay, right? And that's not the spirit oftentimes in Christian circles where we pointing fingers at people that are anxious. Your faith is so weak. Well, that's not God's spirit in saying that. He's saying, hey, I'm with you. Don't be afraid. It's okay. Yeah, so it's a little different. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
It does. Yes. Also, in terms of as a leader or as a pastor at a church, like how can we recognize the fact, like when should I counsel this person as a pastor at my church? Also, when is the time to recognize, okay, well, maybe I need to recommend you to some experts who might know more better, because we talk about, as a, there are
great
so many
question.
aspects.
Great question. I have my senior pastor is very good at sort of balancing those kinds of things, and recently had a person in our church that has some bipolar stuff going on. If you know what bipolar is, it it's very challenging condition, and it's where you feel depression at times, where you're really, really down and just down in the despair, the low, but you also at times feel the super high, like overly eager, overly energetic, overly positive, take on the world kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But you kind of go back and forth,
Mhm.
and it is a roller coaster ride, and that is a situation that is not happening because someone is, let's say, demon possessed,
Mhm.
although that could be an additional thing they might be experiencing. It's also not happening because they have weak faith,
Mhm.
although they might need some help. This particular person that I'm talking about is very strong in faith, very biblically informed, very much striving to walk with the Lord and serve the Lord,
Mhm.
but they ride the ups and downs that are so intense and so troubling. That is a situation where it's kind of beyond what the pastoral staff can help them with. Now, that particular person has gotten a lot of help from on medication
Mhm.
that's taken those highs and lows and not erased them, but made them a little less high and a little less low.
Mhm.
And in the last bit of time has found a lot of help through medication, right? And also a lot of help in seeing a counselor.
Mhm.
How do I deal with this anger that I feel? Now, pastor can help with that question, sure.
Mhm.
But so there is some overlap, right?
Mhm.
But pastor can't help with the medication part. So, that's probably a more obvious example of when do I refer out to someone? Okay, my person in my church, they have bipolar things going on. I might need to talk to them about where are they getting help from a doctor or a counselor.
Yeah.
But that could be true with. Now, that doesn't mean the pastor doesn't ever talk to this person and is totally hands off and just hands them off and forgets about them. No. There's a lot of overlap, but there are certain things that that fall in that mental health realm that the person could get some additional help, and hopefully not contrary help.
Mhm.
But there are Christian counselors out there that are going to be safely coming alongside what that person is hearing in church and not contradicting and
Yeah.
but that could be true for something like depression,
Mhm.
where the person is just so down. And depression is and there is overlap with spiritual things and faith, but it is also one of those things that sometimes just happens to the person,
Mhm.
and there's not a clear explanation of, boy, this person's faith is weak, and
Mhm.
it's easy for Christians to feel guilty about having those kinds of things happen to them. But depression can be something that just comes on you, that is a fog and a cloud that you're just in, and you can't just brush it away and suck it up. And it's in those kinds of situations where a pastor can recognize, okay, this is an identifiable type of condition, perhaps, that would meet one of those diagnoses mental health wise. Boy, I think you got some depression, and it might be helpful for that person to see a Christian counselor, to consider some medication, perhaps.
Yeah.
Other times, that person that's really down, the pastor can be very helpful to them. So it can be hard for a pastor to discern when that is. And but just making a quick list, if someone has been given a diagnosis of bipolar, that's something that needs to have some medication. Or if they have if they're experiencing hallucinations, in the counseling world we call that psychosis.
Mhm.
They're hearing voices that no one else hears. That's time for them to get some professional help on those things. Now, there could be some spiritual things there too, but I want to, if I'm a pastor, want to hear, cover both bases. It's like, okay, if you are experiencing hallucinations and then you get a medication and those go away, that tells me it's not demonic, but it's medical. That's very helpful. So, depression, bipolar, psychosis, schizophrenia is another one that are pretty hardcore mental health diagnoses that would be real clear that, okay, it's time for me to, and I think most pastors, at least, well, I don't know if I can say this anecdotally, but I see a lot of pastors in America kind of coming more to that place where they recognize the value of mental health services. Like my pastor that I mentioned, he is not quickly, I wouldn't say quickly, but he's able to, he has places that he's aware of that would be a good trusted Christian counselor to refer people to if they want to do that, in addition to continuing to converse with them and be helpful to them and minister to them. There's always going to be those areas where it's less clear, and I don't know when is the time for that, but some of those more obvious ones that I mentioned would be more clear. Like when you see signs of those kinds of things, it might be time to, it might be interesting too for you, Adrian, Dr. Peck, I don't know if you met Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Across the hall here.
He's my next guest,
okay.
Yes.
Because he does a whole presentation for pastors on when to know when it's time for some mental health referral. And he'd be a great resource on that.
Yeah, because I think that's a very interesting, because, like, the more remote area that we go to in Nepal as well, like, because we're training people, and then we see there's so many people of like getting demon possessed during the sermon time, and then like hearing things and speaking of the different things, and I wonder like that could be like some of the mental like, because again the concept of like counseling and then the mental health is like completely foreign to us, because it's just now I feel like those will be like some of the things to like bring up and then make people more aware of. Also, can you tell us a little bit about like how important it is in terms of educating the people in the church and congregations in terms of mental health awareness? How often church should do, and what are some of the things that we in a church we are missing?
Boy, that's an insightful question too. Yeah, and to back up just a second. So, like someone experiencing hallucinations or hearing voices, there could be some demonic stuff going on, and there might need to be some spiritual warfare. And like the mistake would be to immediately dismiss that as, and it's a mental health thing. Well, the wise pastor, wise counselor would be aware that it could be both, and that's a possibility. So, your Nepalese brothers and sisters would help, us to remember that, this kind of thing does happen, and it may not be just a mental health condition, but kind of discern which is which, and where there might be some overlap. But to your question about helping people in the church understand mental health, that's really good. I think at least in this country, and that's my limited point of view, there's more acceptance of that, of there being mental health challenges that people need help with that aren't just solely spiritual. Yet there's probably a lack of awareness too. So it's a great question. One of the things that helps is people know, just in my own context, they know that I'm a counselor. They know that I am a counseling professor, right?
Yeah.
So someone who might have a little bit of suspicion against the counseling world, sometimes with good reason. Our secular colleagues have at times been very negative towards biblical Christianity. And so there is that suspicion that's there, and sometimes with good reason. But if they can see me, oh, he's a counselor, and I know him, and he's not evil, and he seems like a nice person, and his integrity, like that helps, right? Just the fact that they know, I don't have to be all that vocal about it, but just being, they know what I do. I'm like, okay, maybe that's not as weird as I thought. But it would be better to be more intentional about that, perhaps at times. There are folks like this person in our congregation who's experiencing some bipolar stuff. They're pretty vocal about it. They share that, and that helps people to see, oh, that's a real thing, and oh, she's progressing and she's getting help, and look at that, wow, okay, that doesn't have to, and she's strong in faith. It hasn't led her off the trail. It's kept her, she's even more grounded. So I think kind of seeing other people's experience, that helps that. One of the things that our church does, we have a grief share group, and grief share is it's like a international program, and anyway, they have materials, but that is a small group that is offered to help people that are grieving. We get a lot of response from that. People in the community that are hurting from, someone who's passed away or whatever. But that's a way that we can minister to folks as a church in kind of, it's not, and that's an emotional problem and not a straight gospel thing, right? Like we share the gospel with every person that comes in the room. Well, actually, we're there helping people grieve, and some of them are not Christians. And there are opportunities for us to say, here's what our church is about. We love Jesus, and we're happy to be helpful to you, right? But it's focused on grief. So it's kinds of things like that keeping ourselves gospel-centered, but also thinking about, are there needs that are there that we can meet? And so the grief share comes to mind. But, our church has not been super intentional about mental health awareness, but kind of in tangential ways, people see things that happen. But the need for the church to be more aware of mental health stuff is there. I think it's true. And to see it as is not a, if you have a trusted Christian counselor, that person's going to be a partner in a gospel focus rather than an antagonist or, someone. You can find counselors that would be that too, who would decry and critique everything in the church. But helping churches and people in churches see that Christian counselors can really be a benefit and a help to them rather than someone to be suspicious of. We talked about, that suspicion sometimes has been against counseling has been with good reason, but doesn't have to be. It is possible to be a strong believer and be fully gospel committed and a counselor professionally. That's possible to be. It's what we try to continue to do.
Yeah, well, we almost coming to the end. Before we just close our conversation. Can you also give us some of the things that you have learned throughout your experience being a minister and being a counselor? Some of the things that you have find very helpful to just help people learn about what our mental health issue is and how, as a church pastors and leaders, we can navigate that. And how can we just be empathetic in listening and in day-to-day life, and then also not get, burned out.
It's really good. Yeah, there's such a thing as pastoral burnout too, or not just pastors, but anyone serving in a ministry role in the church or as a counselor. Yeah. And you mentioned just listening. That's probably the number one thing I would say to folks is, boy, if you can listen to well to others and really care about them, and that's empathy. Like, how, what are you feeling about this? Like, let me understand. Not, hey, I'm going to hear a little bit, then tell you what you should do. No, I want to understand what it's like, what you're going through. Makes me think about a man in our church who is his adult daughter, who's about 35, has cancer, and she's not doing well, and it looks like she's going to pass away. And it's so sad. And the father is really struggling with where is God and why is this happening, and grief and sorrow. What's the most helpful thing I can do? Is it to preach at him? Is it to show him verses that, show God's sovereignty? Or is it to sit with him and cry and say, oh, brother, I can't imagine the hurt that you're going through right now. I'm with you. I'm present. I don't have answers, but I'm with you. That is huge, right? It's huge. So it's not coming at situations with trying to have the right answers, although we want to think rightly. We want to have good theology. We want to have a good worldview, of course. But boy, that hurting person, what they need most is just a listening ear, of an arm around their shoulders, a shoulder to cry on. Let me cry with you. You stated it earlier. Want to be rejoice with those who rejoice and sad with those who are sad. Right. So that empathy is so huge, and there are times and places to have conversations about where are they at with God and how are you wrestling through with that. But it's not in a preachy way. I mean, there's a place for preaching, absolutely. Yeah. Church does that, but that poor man who's grieving his daughter's illness doesn't need preaching. He needs compassion, and he needs presence, and he needs empathy and someone just to grieve with him. So, how do we help? I'd say that's number one. Now, that's from a counselor point of view. Listening and empathy is the key thing. Understand and be present with you. And then being intentional about doing that, but not doing so much of that you are dried up and sucked empty and crispy fried, that you are able to tend to your own well-being as well, so that you can be helpful to others. I think that's important. And giving of ourselves and serving, but if I'm going to be able to give myself of others, I have to be healthy and not just deplete myself and totally burn out, which is what counselors and pastors and people in ministry are famous for doing. Give till you die. You want to give, but also receive. Being part of a body, being connected with others, doing things where you're not just giving, but you are being recharged and refreshed and renewed in your walk with the Lord, in your own life, in the hobbies that you do, people that you connect with, all those things get wrapped up together. But that's kind of a broad answer to your question. But you asked really good questions.
No, that was very, very helpful. Thank
Adrian,
you so much.
You ask questions like you're a counselor, like you have insight into the counseling world. I'm like surprised at some of the things you're asking me. I'm like, wow, that's insightful.
Yeah, no, I think it just came up. But yeah, thank you so much, because I feel like in terms of understanding what counseling is, because I was also not very sure what it is exactly, because actually we in Nepal as well, we do this whenever we had something in need, we do a whole night prayer once in a year. I was talking with my father, who leads the big church right now. I was just telling, like, he was so much sad during New Year time, because they do a whole night prayer. He wasn't feeling well, and he wanted to do a whole night prayer, and then my mother made him not to do that because he was really, really ill. And but for him it was really, really hard. He he struggled for a week, because he wasn't had a time to pray for a whole night with his whole church. So yeah, and that's such a really good insight. Is that like we need to take a time to recharge, and also
It was really
learning
hard
to
for him to say no.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, I think this probably is going to be a very, very helpful for people like us who had just a zero understanding of like what counseling is, and it's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm biased, but I agree. It does help a lot of people.
Mm.
And hey, I think your podcast is neat. Yeah, it's really cool that you're doing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being
Keep
here.
going. Yeah.
Thank you.